Hey guys, our guest today is Hampus Jakobsson, a general partner at Pale Blue Dot, a Swedish seed-stage climate tech fund investing in startups that reduce and reverse the effects of climate change. He was previously at Blue Yard, and before that, an angel with more than 100 angel investments, and before that, a serial founder. Hampus has a ton of insights to share. This is going to be an epic conversation. We go from tricks and tips to fundraise your first time fund, to what kind of investment to run, the reality of and difficulties between raising a fund versus raising for a startup. This is a really interesting conversation. You don't want to miss it. So let's get straight into it. Hampus, welcome to the show. Could you briefly describe Pale Blue Dot for those that don't know you? So fund size, geography, ticket size.
Yeah, so Pale Blue Dot is a 87 million euro fund. We are doing pre-seed and seed. Essentially our fund model is we want 10% for 1 million euros, dollars, pounds. So like the amount is slightly different there, depending on kind of when and where and how the company is at phase. But generally, if a company is raising more than 3 million euros, then we're not probably the right one. We do sometimes do super earlier stage. Like we meet somebody, like two people out of a shed and they really have nothing and they're raising 500K. We have done a couple of those, but I think at the end of the day, our model is still the same. We want to get to 10% for 1 million. So then we essentially we do the pre-seed, and then we probably don't lead the seed, but we participate quite a lot in the seed and like take more in the seed than planned. And then I think that we're a very generalistic fund. Like we're a climate tech fund, but we do absolutely everything. So like we've done anything in transportation, we've done in food, we've done in super deep tech, we've done really nasty, gnarly hardware, we've done very, very, very easy to deploy software. So it's like we're all over the place. Geography, we're Europe and North America. We have done 6 deals in the UK, 5 in the US, 4 in Germany, 4 in the Nordics, and 1 in Netherlands so far.
Okay.
So kind of spread all over the place.
Great. And you are 3 GPs in your team, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you come from operational, entrepreneurial, and angel investing, so not pure products of VC. So how did you raise a first-time fund with that? What's your secret?
Yeah, I think that the secret... I mean, we went out and raised a fund in September 2019 is when we started. And I think September 2019, crazy enough, in Europe, when we talk about climate, people said, I agree with climate. I wonder if one should make a fund out of that. When we talked to American LPs, they said, I agree somebody should do a fund about that. I wonder if climate change is real. So 2019 was like a bit of a dress rehearsal year when we talked to people and they essentially either disagreed about the money part or about the climate part, strange enough. 2020, when that came, I think that the catch-up effect kind of came for us. Like it seemed like a lot of people just suddenly said this is really relevant. So we've done, as a team, Heidi, Joel and myself, we've done 100 plus investments. I used to work for a fund called Blue Yard, where of course I've done initial lots of investment for them. Heidi and Joel used to run a micro fund, and I've been an angel investor done quite a lot of deals that way. So I think the good thing we had is that we were able to show and explain how we had been value add for startups and done pre-seed and seed and A quite a lot. So that was very easy. And also very nice, like LPs who were more founder-led LPs, who were maybe family offices, they could call previous founders that we invested in and talk to them and, which gave us great reviews. And I think the ones that were more financially driven, they were ones that we were struggling more with. The ones that were asking, so you have not been a GP at a fund before, this is your emerging fund. I think what worked with them was, I think, the fact that we were very unique when we started. There was no climate tech fund. So I think when people, like the question people really had was, is there allocation for climate? So that is, I think that when we're going out to raise fund 2, when that's going to happen, I think the first question we're going to ask LPs is, have you decided on a special allocation for climate? Because I wish we would have asked that question earlier. Now that we wasted quite a lot of time to figure out if people agreed with us if climate was investable. But I think that the winning metric, apart from the fact that we had done a lot of deals previously, was that we had a very strong thesis about what is investable in climate. And I think that was really what rolled with people. I would say that independently if it was a kind of more institutional LP or if it was more of a family office, when we explained what we think is happening in the world and how that is investable and how to curb the climate effects, that was when a lot of people nodded and said, yeah, I really agree to this. This is really relevant. And then the questions were like, are there unicorns and stuff like that? But it was very nice to see that resonated so well with people.
And would you say that today would be a completely different rationale? You wouldn't have as much success as the first time fundraising today because it's a lot more crowded. There's more fund managers, trying to spin something off that have the track record that LPs expect.
Yeah, I think that what's harder today, I would say, is that today, I think a lot of people are going to say, so are you starting a climate tech fund? How are you going to differentiate yourself between the climate tech funds that are around and the generalist funds who obviously do climate tech? So like people are going to point at Climentum and Point 9 and EQT and whatever, like lots of great generalist funds, and they're going to say, but these people are writing tickets in climate tech. How are you going to steal a deal from them? And then they're going to point to the pure play climate tech funds who are focused their brands on it and focus on it, and they're going to say, how are you going to steal a deal from them? And I think that's a legit question. I think that's.
And how do you steal a deal from them?
Well, I think
today,
I think in our case, I think what our edge is that we're, as you said yourself, I think that we're three founders who built and scaled companies. I think that the way we win deals is that we really want to figure out what the founders are thinking and what they want to build. So I think that there's almost a joke when we go on a call. What happens a lot of time for me when I meet a complex business is like I read their deck, I look through everything, and then I go on the call. And then after the, hey, hello, how's the weather in Berlin or whatever, and we talk a bit chatty about like, where they are and just like being nice people, right? After that first introduction chat, I usually say, hey, Alicia, before you pitch me, just like, can I just try to explain what you do? And they say, so what? And then I pitch them. So then I just go through, so you are essentially connecting to existing heat pumps with software, and by doing that, and you get access to them through them, you big utilities, and you sign them on these kind of contracts, then you can do demand response, you can handle off the peaks, you can sell that for 50 euros per pop per year, per heat pump, and like I walk them through their own business, right? And I think you think that heat pumps are going to scale and the way you're going to get, and then they just go, yeah, it's like 60% correct. Or they say, yeah, that's close. Or they say, no, like you're 20% correct. And I think
so you demonstrate intelligence.
I'm not sure. Like sometimes I think I would say it's a flip of a coin. I think in some cases it's demonstrating intelligence. In some cases it's more demonstrating empathy, because I would say the cases when we're 40% or less correct, it becomes very, very funny. Like they just laugh and say like, no, that's not at all what we do. That's not at all how it works. But it's really, really funny to hear that's how it looks. And it shows, of course, that our deck is not very good, but holy moly, like, no, that's not how it works. And then they tell me how it works. And I think that the ones that are, that they, that we get what they do, they go like, yeah, that is. And of course, we can prepare, that's respected, of course. But one of the things which I think is interesting about it, now we can actually go into the details. So now when I say, one of the headaches I had with this market is how to actually sign up utilities. That's my worry. And I think from a founder's perspective, I've had this experience myself as a founder. I think when a VC or an angel investor or whatever have a comment, but it's completely, they haven't thought it through or whatever. I just hate having conversations with people who say, oh, do you think food?
So you don't want to waste people's time.
Yeah, and I think that then also we can drill down on the question. And when I say, I wonder how you're going to sign utilities, they know that I kind of, at 80% plus at least, I get what they're doing. So they can say, I don't think it's that hard, Hampus. Okay, but you think it's hard, and you obviously kind of get what we do. And then it becomes a really interesting conversation. And I think that is really useful.
Yeah, so on the good side, right, they value the fact that you have intelligence, you have insight, you've been around, and you think like an entrepreneur. But on the downside, when the company is clearly poor, are you brutally honest and you cut off the call? How do you do with that? Which is 80% of startup calls out there. Yeah,
so I would say we actually don't go on that many calls. So we actually, a lot of times, we look at the deck and we feel that either this is something where we feel like extremely competitive and we have a very hard time seeing the edge what they're doing, or we actually a lot of times feel it's not our kind of deal. So a lot of times we look at a company and it's like, this is a good company, but I mean, we're not the people who should invest in this. So a lot of it's like a lot of stuff in like just pure electricity, like your PPAs and stuff, where we just feel like these are just massive spreadsheet businesses where you're supposed to be like super, super, super savvy on detail, like financial engineering. And Heidi and Joel and myself, we're not that in love with it. Like, I think it's just not like, I mean, we've looked at some of those and just said, nah. We've done some fintech, but those are very different from the typical like energy and stuff. So I think a lot of times we just say, look, no, we're going to call. And what we do then is we respond and say, give them some feedback, but usually point them at other VCs. saying that, this is a VC I think that likes this. And I think a lot of time it's about trying to add value, which is easy for both parties. Like, it's easy for us to say, you're doing a hardware company. I mean, Extantia is good. You're doing kind of this kind of energy company. You're raising a pretty meaty round for Europe. Have you talked to Velo Ventures? And the thing is that they go like, no, I haven't. And then, we can just say, send me an email. I can forward it to them.
So you're passing the hot potato basically to someone else, and it's sort of a polite way to get out.
No, yes and no. I would say I don't do it. We don't do it if we think the deal is, like, if we look at the company and say, I don't think this company is very good. Or, like, it's a very, very, very competitive space. Okay. Then would usually just say, I think this, I would say 50% of my responses are, this is a super competitive space. I have a very hard time seeing differentiation. I'm really sorry. We don't want to waste your time. I think it's a time when we look at it, it's like, this is probably good, but it's like, I'm not sure it's for us. Or we look at it and say, this is good, but it's not that strong on climate, but it's definitely good business. Then we can say, like, talk to this other fund, which is like a not climate fund.
And what's the ratio? You said you don't take that many calls, so let's assume, the average VC gets hundreds of decks, right, a given week. So how many calls do you take per week, and what's the selection mechanism?
I would say that between the three of us, you and Heidi and myself, I guess that we're going on like 5 to maybe 15 calls a week. I think that's 15 is a pretty intense week.
Individually?
No. In total.
All of you?
Yes.
And you join the calls, three of you at the same time?
No. So the way it works is like essentially our process is really about passion, pride, and love. It's essentially everything is designed about that. So like if I go on a call and I feel like, holy moly, motherfucker, this is like, I love this team or I love this idea, then I'm going to go through fire and hell to solve this. Like, I'm going to be like pitching Heidi and Joel and say, I want to do this deal. And the mechanism we have is like, we can just do the deal. Like, I can just do the deal. And Heidi can just do the deal. We essentially try to help each other get out of the deal. So when I fall in love with a deal, then Heidi will tell me like, no, shit, Hampus, don't do this. This is worse or whatever. And we really try, even if we are loving ourselves.
So good cop, bad cop. Someone plays a role to really take it down.
Yeah, but actually not towards the entrepreneurs. Like it's more like devil's advocates. It's more like when I pitch Heidi, she's like, "No, but seriously, do you think there's any revenue in this company?" I'm like, "Yes, listen." And then she's like, "Yeah, like I can't get you to not be passionate, right?" But then you have the other case where like I look at it and I really like the idea, but I don't really click with the founders, or I feel like I wish Pablo Dot did this investment, but I'm not the lead. And then I try to quickly pitch it to Heidi and Joel. So I just say like, talk to these people. I think it's your kind of deal. And those are rare that they convert, but they sometimes do. So like then I just met a company last week, which I really liked, but I felt like it's not my kind of business, but I hope it's Heidi's kind of business, and she's meeting them this week. So then she meets them, and then if she falls in love, then, the circus is on again. And that's kind of what it is.
Interesting. Do you favor consensus-driven deals? So amongst the three of you, right, in investment committee, or it's contrarian, it's fully contrarian?
We don't have an investment committee. We have an investment committee, quote unquote. But the thing is, the investment committee is you want to do it, and the other partners are essentially not vetoing you. So like we have a scale which is called hell yes, yes, no, and hell no. And the thing is, if you're hell yes, so like you're just like I'm hell yes. The only way this deal is not going to happen is if one of the other two are saying hell no. And hell no is like, that's a portfolio veto. It is like, this is a sexual offender that's doing this company, or this is a company which is like a greenwashing company, or this is like, this could destroy the fund. But if you say you want to do something which is really wild, and the two of us are both saying no, we're just like, I don't like it. The other person, I don't like it. Then you get to do the deal. It's no worries at all. Like you get to do it.
Interesting.
We only vote so that you can feel how negative are we, so that you can think again and say, no, I still want to do it.
And what's the ratio of... So you all come with your personal biases, right? Everyone comes with their own program, and they're just programmatically wired to just like certain deals. Do you find that on a regular basis you just don't align, you don't see eye to eye, and there's a lot of hell yeses from your side that just the other two are just not really seeing eye to eye? Does that create a lot of friction, or it seems to be?
No, it does, and I would say like that. I think that passion and pride and love is friction. So I think that the thing about this is like. I would say that there's another kind of deal which is the actual really funny deal, which never happens. So there are a lot of deals. I would say every month at least. I would say like at least 12 to 15 deals per year. All three of us give it a yes, but nobody gives it a hell yes. So then we don't do it.
Okay.
So there's quite a lot of time we see it like, this is a good company. This is going to be good. This is actually going to work. And the founders are the right people. I'm not in love, but I think this is solid. And then the two others like, I feel exactly the same. And then
can you talk us through a story? That I would love to see it in practice, right? A recent deal where there's a lot of friction, and in the end, you ended up making it. Could you walk us through that?
Exactly. So like I did an investment, like let's see, there was I'm trying to think of like strange cases. So there are a couple of strange cases. One is like we did a charging hardware in the US last like January, February, right? And what happens was that Heidi meets this guy cold inbound from LinkedIn. Like he just pings her and says, "Hey, I would love to talk to you, blah, blah." You know, who checks LinkedIn? Like, for God's sake, that's just crazy. So the thing is that Heidi goes on a call with this guy, and it's just like, there's something the way he writes, there's something that she goes on a call, 15-minute call. Just like, he's in Oakland, California, so like 9 hours time difference. Goes on a call, just talks about it very briefly. He's fairly academic about it, but he's very likable. And she's like, "Nah, okay, thanks a lot, this is good, interesting, thanks, Joe." You know, leaves. Next day, comes to the office, meets me, and says, like, "I talked to this guy yesterday. I think you're going to love him a lot, but I think this is a company I don't think we're going to do. Like, it's crazy much hardware. It's like he feels a bit academic about it, but like liked him a lot." She explains it, and I'm like, "I'm going to go on the call. Like, hey, I'm going to like you like him as a person. Let's go on the call." I go on the call, and I completely fall in love with the guy. I'm like, this. Like, I really love it. I don't like the way the business is going to be conducted. Like, the go-to-market is brutal, but I really like him. And then essentially for 2 weeks, which is a very long time at Pale Blue Dot time, it's like we go back and forth, Heidi and Yuval and I, and talk about this. It's like so much hardware, no real software, should we do it? Yuval goes on a call with a guy, likes him, but says, "No, I really don't want to do this. This is the completely wrong deal," right? And then essentially I go on a call with him, and he's just like, essentially looks me in the eye and says, "Hey, if we're going to solve climate change, we're going to do the hardware." And I'm like, "You're right. Okay, let's go do it." And that was like the wildest thing, because like essentially I just ping Heidi and Yuval on WhatsApp at like 10 p.m. in the evening and says, just talk to Joe. Fuck, I want to do the deal. And like I want to do the deal for the stupidest reason. And it's like, I love him. It's clearly needed of climate, and it's clearly needed that we like are bold enough to do this. And it's like, that's the thing about pride as well. It's like, we look a lot at that stuff and we say, you know, when we look back at this in 10 years, look back, are we going to be proud that we did that investment? Are we going to be proud that we kind of did that to that founder or whatever? And we just looked at it and said, we would feel a lot like proud to actually, I mean, being proud is a lot about bravery. It's about doing something you're uncomfortable with. So we just
and can you tell us the specifics of that deal? Because it's quite insightful to see that, right? And the fact that it's a little destructured and just about falling in love with the. Can you talk us through? Is it pre-seed? Is it seed? What's maximum risk? And at the end of the day, it's all about the person. And what's the ticket that you invested?
So we did. I think we did roughly $1 million. It's and it's the team is like an ex-Apple Cars team. Like they know everything about that market and cars, and like super geniuses. And then they're building an infrastructure to charge extremely large vehicles. So like think about like big trucks, and it's nasty hardware. It's like nasty hardware. It's nasty to install it. It's nasty to figure out where to charge. It's nasty to pull energy from the grid. It's like nasty. Everything's nasty. This is one of those things where I think all those VCs, we see them and we just say, I wish they get some awesome big grant. Like that's what you think when you see them. I think what's different here is that the founder has figured and thought so much about de-risking and how to run a process where you don't need $20 million to test your idea. So like he has made it venture with a caveat that it's still a lot of hardware. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And what happened is essentially we just said, yeah, let's lead this round, let's give them a ticket, and let's go out and find VCs on the ground in the US that can be, more on the ground. Because like we love co-investing. I think that the 1 million for 10% model is really designed for getting either another VC in, or angel investors or microfunds in. So we went out and hunted and got 2 awesome co-investors that we're really happy for. That they have feet on the ground and they get the business really well, and they're like good funds. So like we like working with them. But I think that deal by deal, this is the case. We had another deal we did in London, Climate X, where like 2 people from X banking, which is honestly not our category. Usually we do. It's not our kind of people we fall in love with. And these 2 people are building a climate risk, like a way of looking at risk for real estate and property. And it's, again, something we don't tend to fall in love with. What happened was Heidi talked to them. Heidi essentially, declines them on the call very politely, but kind of, says like, this is not kind of our deal. They send a great follow-up email with data. Heidi reads it and goes through it with me, and she says like, hey, I actually want to talk to them again because this is good points. She goes to talk to them again, comes out of the call, says to me, I agree with them, but I'm going to decline them anyway. Declines them the day after, And then they say, hey, can you do another call? And she's like, no, I'm not going to do another call, right? And then they write another email. And then Heidi like looks up at, like, we sit opposite each other, and she's just like, I can't decline this company. This is just so painful. I can't decline them. And I know. And then I look at her and I just end up saying, I think you should do it. And she's like, what?
I think you should do it.
Yeah, and like, no, I mean, she wants to do it, right? But she wants to do it, but she also doesn't want to do it. And I just like, I look at her and it's like, you realize that it's such a superpower. If you're talking to a founder, they're from a sector you don't care about. They're from a type of person that maybe you don't fall in love with generally, and you really like them. You really, really, really like them, and you really, really can't decline this company. That is a superpower. And I think that founders, great founders, they have some superpower. And I think the thing is that what you don't want is founders. Is you don't want like well-rounded and like quote unquote like stable people. Like if you have a person who's like very well-rounded, that's not usually what you need at all. You need a person who has like some kind of extreme skill, being able to recruit everyone you want, or being able to kind of get anybody on a meeting, or being able to sell to anybody, or being able to build anything or whatever. You need that kind of one super skill, or great if you have more than one super skill. But that means that if you meet these people, you just realize you can't decline it. Then maybe you should do it. I think it's really important. I hate when VCs say, oh, we're building, it's like a startup having a VC because, we're fundraising and it's like very similar. It's not at all fucking similar. I think it's a complete joke when people say that. Like when you're running a startup, you have no identity.
There's a double click on this. This is very important because there's a misconception on that front, right? So fundraising for a fund versus fundraising for a startup, very different. Can you actually talk us through? I would really like to get one of the most painful moments you've experienced raising this fund. Because it's easy when you're on the other side, right? You can celebrate, post on LinkedIn, but tell us, paint us a picture of the pain that it is to fundraise.
I wouldn't say it's actually painful to raise for a fund. Like I would actually say
it's not painful.
No, I would actually not. So like I think it's not a breeze. I think the thing is that I actually think it's way nicer raising money for a fund than it's raising money for a startup. I raised money for like having done 100 and something angel investments. I've been participating in I think 100 plus rounds when I've been trying to help a startup where I'm very active in fundraising, either their seed or their A or their B or whatever. I hate fundraising for funds for startups. It is freakingly horrible raising for a startup. You talk to people who are totally idiots.
How is it nice to raise for a fund?
I think the thing with raising for a fund,
it's not butterflies and rainbows.
No, it's not butterflies and rainbows, but I think it's more like sales. It's like we all keep our identities intact. Like the thing is, when you're raising for a startup, like when you're pitching, people just call you stupid. People just say, "Why would anybody ever eat insects? Or why would anybody ever do this?" And you're like, "You're talking about the thing I did my PhD on. I spent 20 years in this. I promise. Like this is important." And people are like, "I think this is meaningless," or whatever. It's just like, or they say, "I think this is competitive." It's like, yes, of course it is, but it's important, right? I think raising for a fund is like you come out with a thing where like it's like we're doing a fund. This is the ticket size. This is the round size, and like 80% will just say, "No, thank you." And you're like, okay. And it's irritating, right? They say no. But it's kind of like, if you're selling shoes, it's like you say to people, do you want the shoes? They'll say, no. And it's like, okay, it's not me. I mean, like, you don't want the shoes. And then, sometimes people say, I don't think you're a good fund manager and stuff. And it's like, I mean, they're doing their job. It's like, I get it. And I would say that raising for a fund, I think the biggest difference is their identity. It's like both parties know why I'm doing, and they get it. And they might not agree that it's a good business idea, but they get it. Whereas when you're raising for a startup, like the other part of the VC side, they say that you are crazy. They call your identity a bluff. And I think that is such a fucking irritating situation where you're like, I promise you this is a great idea. We're printing money. And they're like, I don't believe in you.
I want to provide just a different perspective. It's very insightful to get your views on this. I see it from the other side, right? Today we're in an over-capitalized market where if you're a decent founder, you can probably get money, right? Especially for hardware, for something that's really, really complex. There is a ton of pockets of capital available. When you're a fund manager, it's highly unlikely, especially for first-time funds, to raise a fund in 3 months, 4 months. Yeah. I haven't heard that, unless it's a solo GP round and super small fund size. But if you're, at the fund level that you are, how long did it take you? Can you give us a reality check?
I left Blue Yard 1st of September. We started fundraising in October. We opened the fund in June. So October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. So what is that? 9 months.
And It was a home run after home run. How did you get your investors?
No. It was no after no after no after no after no after no. I mean, we talked to, I think we counted on more than 400 meetings. I think that, so what we did is we wrote an email, like we wrote just like the blurb that you send as a founder. We wrote it very clear. This is what we're aiming to do, right? We're like, this is the first close size. This is a CVs of us. This is like, not a lot of attachment, just very, very short email, short and sweet. And the point is, we wrote all the nasty stuff in the blurb. So like one iPhone screen blurb where people can read and they can just quickly say no. So like the point was like we send this to people, we want a lot of people to see this, and then we want people to just look at it and say, we don't believe in climate, or we don't do emerging funds, or we don't do funds of that size. So we got a lot of no's very, very quickly. And those we don't even calculate it. Like we don't count them. We're just like, we wanted every single call we went to, we wanted to make sure that they agreed that there's space to build a climate tech fund in Europe, that like building a fund of like $100 million size is meaningful, 3 GPs can deploy this, like like all of the basic stats that an LP goes on and says, I don't disagree with you. I'm not going to invest, but I don't disagree with you. And on this call, we now talk. And I think that was great, because I think that what it's really painful to raise for a fund is when you kind of go on meetings and you realize that table stakes we don't even agree on. Like, we don't even agree on this fund size or ticket sizes or stages or whatever. That's like when you just end up like... So what we did is we wrote an email, which was very, very easy to say, thanks for asking, but we're not interested. So every time we went on a call, they were interested, which meant that call was useful.
I want to believe in what you're saying. I've experienced something else with institutional capital, where there's always interest, right? And
no. I mean, it's like we have one pension fund, we have one fund of fund, and then we have two funds of fund, two funds of funds, one pension fund, and then we have 7 big family offices, and then everything else is entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs' own family offices.
Can you give us a picture of the sort of divide of ticket size, if you may?
Absolutely.
So what's the largest ticket size from? Yeah.
With the largest is like 20 million. So we have 6 tickets that are in the 8 to 20 million size, and then we have 50 tickets that are in the 250 to a million size. Kind of like.
And would you say that the level of pain has been fairly similar across the board?
No. The what we've done essentially is like we viewed it as in raising an A round and having convertible notes on the side, so that when we like now I'm thinking about it as a startup. So when we talked to the Supercell founders, they were like, I love this is super cool. You should meet 3 of my team. Like a second meeting, they were like, we jazzed on the call. It was great. We're like, this is fun. And then they said, we don't really like do funds that much, but could you do like 250K maybe? And we're like, yeah, that's cool. And like, I'm not going to say that their ticket size to make sure. And
so
like,
created an SPV for those small tickets?
No. And then we just said, that's great. We'll put it in your spreadsheet. We'll just put it in your spreadsheet and say like this person, this, blah, blah, blah. And then we emailed them back right after the call and said, thanks. This is super interesting. Just like for my notes, I put you down at 250K. And then they responded, yes, that sounds great. And then we waited like a week or two. And then we said, hey, by the way, what is your investing entity? And that's when a lot of people were like, haven't thought about that. I'll check with my financial person. And then we got into the second loop of like quick DD, like some kind of financial person got in and said, tell me something about the fund, give me some material. And that was like great, because now the person who runs the fund, who owns the money, says, I want to do this. Now figure out that I can do it. And that was great, because these people, they're helpful, right? Because the boss has said you're going to do it. And now they're going to say, okay, the boss wants it. Let me just figure out how we do it. And those were very helpful for us. They asked us really good questions, and they actually told us good stuff. But the thing on the other side, so those were like, we just end up writing in the spreadsheet, and then we just now have their investing entity, and then we just said, we're going to ping you 4 weeks before first closing. That's it. And then the other one is like, now we're slowly working on these like funds of funds, pension funds. You fly to Luxembourg, you fly to whatever big city, you meet these people. You have to sometimes even wear a suit. It's horrible. And I think the interesting, and those like, you're meeting like a person who, their job is to handle somebody's money, and that somebody is like an institution, right? So their questions are like
Their job is to actually pass an email or the folder to the next guy that will then bring it to the boss, and by the time you really are to the decision maker, it's 3 months in.
Yeah, and I think the decision maker is a consensus-driven decision maker. So like, it's the problem is with those is that you don't get to meet Bob or Alice who signs. Like, you get to meet a group of 10 people. And you realize that they might be in like informal stakeholders and formal stakeholders. You don't really know what's going on. So I think what we did there is that we found what's it called? ILQPA, whatever it's called.
ILPA, yeah.
ILPA, thank you. So like essentially a due diligence questionnaire that we downloaded and filled out, and we sent it to them. And I think that was the blessing, because when we sent that over, essentially what happened is that people just like looked at that like sheet, and then they said, okay, you filled in all the, all the data. So now we can have a conversation. And I think that so that now we have this conversation that's going to take between 3 months and 9 months or whatever. And but here, remember, every time we talked to them, we said, oh, by the way, it's funny because yesterday the Unity founder said he wants to invest. Oh, by the way, Kevin Ryan, I don't know if you've seen Kevin Ryan's LinkedIn profile, but he's joining.
So creating a bit of FOMO.
And they were like, holy shit, these are pretty impressive people, right? They know what they're doing. And some of these fund of funds, they just their brain wasn't moved, but their gut was moved. So they just felt, hey, I'm got to do my job. I got to fill everything. I got to know that we checked everything. But they felt the enthusiasm. And I think that's the thing, is that you have to realize, I think I learned that when I was building a startup. Lawyers are people too. It is these people are people. You talk to them, and if they're enthusiastic, they're enthusiastic. But I think that, so a lot of times I view it as enterprise sales. It's I meet these people, and I see that they are interested, and then I usually ask them, how can I help you to decide? What's between me and a yes? And they sometimes say hundreds and hundreds of things, and I'm like, just tell me the hundreds and hundreds of things.
You seem to have really been thorough about your thinking about how the sales process of fundraising, right? And it seems like there's a good way to fundraise and a bad way to fundraise. If you were to single out one element that you think was just a home run for most people that you spoke with, is it the story, or is it the fact that the team looked fairly compelling, or is it the timing? And maybe the timing played a big role.
I think timing plays a big role if you're doing something which is vertical. If you're doing a generalist fund, it's not timing, right? It's just I think
generalist climate.
Yeah, I think if you're doing a generalist climate fund today, I think that there's definitely good and bad timing, of course, but I don't think it's timing per se. I think the biggest thing is it's kind of the same as with startups. Why you and how will you win? So I think a lot of times I think that figuring out why are we going to be able to do this well, and how are we going to win the way we operate stuff. And I think at the end of the day, the headache is that these, at least for me, these are not hard facts. When I meet a fund and they have an AI that sorts their deals, or they have whatever, they have a token for the founders, I just think it's total bullshit. I don't think that you can do anything. But at the end of the day, the headaches are the ones that win. The reasons you win deals is usually because of soft reasons, right? You focus on something, or you work really hard, or you're always going to fly around, or you've built your companies yourself and you know people a lot, or whatever. It's soft stuff. So I think at the end of the day, I think that what I always recommend people, anybody I know who says we're thinking about starting a fund, I would say start as a small fund as you can and invest it. And then when you invest in that, then you can show a track record, and then people can interview the founders. Because I think that institutions, they invest essentially in two things. They invest in that they know that fund 1 might not be super, but they are in it for fund 2 and fund 3. So the thing is, they don't want you to be if you are thinking about doing a fund 1 and living the glory days with that's probably the wrong thing. So they're investing real long term in you.
Even though stats prove the contrary, right? If you look at EIF, so the
emerging fund manager,
right?
No, exactly.
The first-time fund, the emerging fund managers tend to outperform, right? So
I'm not sure if
should maybe recalibrate.
No, I'm not sure if it's the first fund though. I think it's but I agree with the emerging fund. So it's more like the 3 first funds. I think the reason the first fund usually outperforms is actually because the first fund is a lot smaller, and the smaller funds, of course, have way better multiples
and more focus, and also the passion, right? The emerging fund managers, they need to prove themselves.
I think
they're completely going over,
I think
above and beyond.
Yeah, I guess it's 50-50. I think that the thing is, if you have a $20 million fund, it's extremely much easier to have a 4x multiple fund than if you have a $100 million fund. And the reason is, of course, very simple, because if you have a $100 million exit in a company, then if you're a $20 million fund, that's a pretty nice exit. If you have a $100 million exit in a $100 million fund, and I don't mean you get $100 million, but the company sold, that's a pretty bad exit. So the problem is, if you have the bigger fund you have, the more you rely on massive unicorns. And the problem with massive unicorns is they take time to build. So I think the cool thing about starting $20 million funds is that you can actually show pretty nice TVPI, and you can actually show quite nice multiples, which means that you actually have something that works. And then, of course, the problem is that if you're a big institution, you need to multiply, $200 million. So you don't care about a $20 million fund. That actually gets back to one about the sales process we did, is we try to weed out people that wanted to needed too big fund sizes, because there's a lot of people who want to go into climate who say
minimum
you need a
ticket size.
you need a $250 million fund, because we do $50 million tickets and we can't own more than X%. And then the problem is that you just realize, oh shit, we're $100 million fund. And then you balloon your fund to $250 million because you want this LP. The problem is, like, you as a person, your DNA is wired to do seed, and like you have a $250 million fund, you can't do seed rounds. Like, that's impossible. You're going to do so many seed rounds. And so I think that's the headache, is that I think that at the end of the day, I'm extremely grateful that people just believed in us, right? They saw like all of the soft stuff we said about how we believe the world to work and how we believe ourselves to be good at stuff. And we're very vulnerable in saying that when people said, oh, why did you do a $300 million fund? I think we just said, I think we would suck at it. And people are like, what?
Your fund size is your strategy.
Exactly, our fund size is our strategy, exactly.
Does that mean that for Pale Blue Dot 2, so as you go out fundraise, and I don't know
Similar
where you
fund.
are, right, in that deploying, is it going to be the similar fund size, similar strategy?
Exactly. Okay. So like slightly larger. I think that when we look at it, it's like 87 million euro is, if you just do the pure math, I don't know if you, as all other fund managers, are using the same lovely tools as we do, but we love the Causal and like Causal app, like fund modeling tools, and it's really nice to kind of just
Causal apps. We'll link everything in the show notes.
Causal.app. It's like a super nice way of just modeling a fund and figuring out like essentially what the big drivers are. And I think that figuring out like, is it breadth or width of portfolio? Like, do you want a 30 logo portfolio of startups where you own 10%, or do you want a concentrated 10 portfolios where you own 20%, right? And like stuff like that. And it's really, really
And what's
nice.
your belief?
My belief is that depends if you want to go for high risk, high return, or lower risk, solid. Like, are you after? I think if you make a flat fund, like if you make a 30 logo 10% shareholding, it is extremely hard to make like a 5x fund. I think it's like almost impossible. I think it's like if you hit Uber, it's great, right?
But so it had to be more concentrated.
No. So I think that on the other contrary, if you build a 10 logo fund with 20% shareholding, I think you have a chance of doing a 5x fund, but it's extremely unlikely, because like you have very few logos to hit a solid company. So I think that the question is like, are you after like like a high thing or a broad thing? The good thing, if you do a 30 portfolio fund with 10% shareholding each, it's like the probability of you doing more than 1x fund is fairly okay. The probability of doing a 2x fund is fairly okay. 3x is harder, right? 5x is very hard. So I think that we essentially aim to say we're going to do roughly 30 with 10% shareholding, because we think that the unicorns in climate haven't really come that far yet, and because you invest in stuff like hardware and like stuff that have longer lead times and maybe not the same exit landscape, like food has a different kind of exit landscape. We felt that we don't think that even if we own 20% in a company, they're not going to be that Uber. So like we would prefer to have a breadth, and that breadth also gives us the breadth of industries, that we can do transportation and industry and food and whatever. And if we do only 10 logos, we can't. Like then we have to be very, very much pick and concentrate. So like we ended up saying very broad portfolio with 10% shareholding. The other sweet thing with 10% shareholding is to get very collaborative. So the nasty thing is that you're a 20% shareholding fund, is that then you say it's our deal and no one else's deal. So you take the whole round, you just shut everyone else out. There's an angel wants in, maybe she or he gets it, but very improbable, right? The thing is that with your 10% fund, you're super collaborative. So like we did a deal in January. We talked to the founders a couple of times. We said we love this thing. We essentially said we'll just give you a convertible note. We'll build that Notion page. We'll go out and talk to other people. We super lucky for the whole situation was like we built super short Notion page. We would like had spent 2 days on it. We pinged our friends at 50 years that we like, Seth and Ella.
What's a Notion page? Meaning,
so we just build a page. We just build a page for the startup. Like we built like if we're looking at a startup.
Okay.
And then we essentially build not a pitch deck, but like we build our kind of view it as our DD room, whatever you want to call it. So like this is like why we're investing. This is where the market is great. These are the founders. These are fear, uncertainty, doubt. These are weaknesses. We share this page with the founders. You make it
fully transparent. Exactly.
We share with the founders.
That's good to be.
And then we actually clone them. For sometimes the founders are like, sometimes we have an internal version, and most of the times we have a pure version that they can see. But sometimes we actually do have stuff that, for example, when we do a lot of reference calls, we don't want the founders to read the reference calls, because that's like it's people that said stuff about them, even if they said great stuff. But that's just private stuff. So those are linked to hidden pages. But like the founders can read everything we think about them.
Is this something that you'd be willing to share, or is that proprietary and it's too much of a secret sauce?
I can't. No, it's not secret sauce for us. But the problem is like it's everything about the startup. So like if you go
just the format with the community, something that we could share with other funds.
The format is super simple. It's like essentially everything you worry about the startup. So like first it is like why we would invest. So like we just have, hide. Local like transportation and last mile is a massive climate pollution. The founders are super strong. One was the best in their university ever, did a turnaround in their family business. The other one is like a super amazing person at finding and poaching talent to get them on, and was like the captain of Manchester City youth team. Like super stellar people. They've hustled, they built a business, they've done this and that before. It's super amazing. Okay, so that's like the intro. People read that like, I agree about the climate, I agree about the people, awesome, and then move on. And then it's like, now go into the market. Like, how does the logistic market work? Like what's last mile? How big is the climate problem? How does the players work? Who are the competitors? We just go through these things and we just write. And the founders get to write too, right? And then we just say, we really want to co-invest with whatever fund. We just say, we send them a blurb saying, hey, we're investing in Hive, we're doing this deal, these are the terms, are you interested? And they say, no, we don't like, last mile, whatever. We're like, okay, whatever. And then, again, we want people to quickly say no. And if people say no, yeah, they're kind of interesting, then I say, here's our Notion page. And they read it and like, this is sweet. I really think this is super cool. I really think
cool.
This is
good insight. I wanted to come back to one core point you made, right? You said that you as advice to first wannabe fund managers or first-time emerging fund managers, start small, start quick. 20 million size, much better than 100 million.
Yeah,
but I can't help but I can't help but realize that your first one was 87 million. So you're closer to the 100 than to the 20. Is it by design or is it just a victim of your success?
No, I would say that the problem was that there were two reasons maybe. I think the one is that Hide Annual ran a microfund before, so like they felt, and I mean I was in the IC of it, we had quite a lot of target practice, and I worked at Blue Earth, which is a $250 million fund. So like we had from two sizes, like Blue Earth on the larger size and them on the smaller size, were doing a lot and like looking at a lot. And we essentially said the problem is of course the management fees. The problem is like if you run a $20 million fund and like your 3 fund managers, this is going to be impossible. Like you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to figure out your salary somewhere else, or you have to deploy the fund really fast. And so we originally had a plan of doing a $40 million fund, or €40 million fund. Sorry. So that was that. So essentially, we designed the fund and said we have 2 scenarios: we do a $40 million fund, or €40 million fund, or we do an $80 million fund. And we essentially had 2 very different scenarios. We went out and started having conversations. And our anchor actually, is what they did end up saying is they end up saying we'll anchor any of these. So like we can do this much a percent of the fund independently. And when they said that, and why having these like rolling closings, convertibles, so to say, not having convertibles, but like, essentially these conversations with people, we summed that up and saw like, now we were at like 50 something, 52 if we actually looked at the ratios of them and everything. So then we said, let's aim for 80 instead. Like that feels like we actually have the math to, instead of doing a 40 fund, let's try to do an 80 fund. And we had like, then we recalibrated the whole system and like looked at it and said, now we have 2 outputs. We have a €60 million fund and we have an €80 million fund. So like we designed 2 new, portfolio structures and everything. Just like looked at it. So like we don't want to go south of 60 and we don't want to go north of 80 was the plan. And then what happened is like essentially everybody realizes is like there's a massive catch-up effect when you're saying now we're doing final closing. So what happened was that suddenly everybody said, hey, is this the last chance? I want to join. And then we just ballooned up to 87. So the plan was not
Did you do 2 closes or one single close?
We did 2 closes. We did one in June and one in March. So June 2020 and March 2021.
So and fairly spread out.
Fairly spread out, exactly. We just kept it open because we didn't care. Like we closed the fund in June, and as a lot of fund managers, we just stopped fundraising completely. We closed the fund and we did 7-8 investments without bothering to talk to a single other LP. We're just like, now we're just like, essentially, the only LPs we talked to between June and I think October were essentially people who inbound or that we had already booked a call with. But essentially we just said...
And how much more capital did you raise between first close and second close?
So 53 versus 87. And the thing is, we actually capped it at 87. We had like... No. So when that happened in October we said, okay, now let's actually look at closing the fund. Because now we've done a lot of investments, we're starting to work with the portfolio. The good thing is then you go from that fantasy football structure where like you have fake logos and talk about fake companies to when you talk to LPs, you have 7-8 investments. So people say, oh, I like these companies, or why did you invest in that company? That sounds super weird. And that was great. So then we essentially in October we said, okay, let's go out and quote unquote fundraise again. And then the difference is we have something to talk about. We're not talking about a fantasy thing, so let's talk about it. And then we were way above 87. Like we were like I think we were 100. No, not oversubscribed, but there was a lot of interest, and a lot of people they would do it if. So a lot of people said, we will do it if we can be one of the anchors and we can get this in the LPA. Or we will do it if you also have this. Or we will do it if you do blah, blah, blah. So then we had to ask ourselves is that, which of these things do we agree to? So some of the things we said, that's a good point. We kind of like that. Maybe we should do that. And then we talked to like the existing, advisory board of anchors. It's like, are you okay with this? Do you think this is interesting? And then sometimes we just looked and said, no, we don't want to do this at all. And we actually don't want this. And then it's not oversubscribed because we were never actually complying to it. Like we had fund of funds and said, we will do this if you, hire a person in this country or whatever. And we're like, no, we're not going to do that. That's like not complication. We will do this if you apply this level of SFDR level. And we're like, no, we don't want to do that. So that then it's like, if we're desperate, of course we would, I guess. But like, we don't think it's a very good idea.
And I want to ask a question, right? It's a bit of a. There's definitely not consensus on this. When people announce the first close, would you be in favor of just doing a PR launch and just announcing it? Because it creates people come out of the woods, LP conversations start organically happening.
100%.
But would you communicate the total fund size or just the amount of money that you've raised?
No, I think you should.
So far?
I think I'm a super big believer in like transparency in general. I think that the way, so we did it, we said like, we did a launch, like TechCrunch talked to us super nicely. We did a lot. We said like, Pale Blue Dot, Heidi and Hampus, like blah, 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 raising their climate tech fund, 53 million euros and already 5 investments out of the gate or whatever. And like, I don't remember how number it was. And then the TechCrunch article described a bit of investments. What was super nice is like a lot of people pinged us and said, either they said, I don't get it, why do you invest in that company? Like, doesn't seem like climate, or does this work? How do you build a market around this? And those calls were great, because then we talked to people and they were like, you've thought quite a lot about this. And we're like, yes. And they said, oh, by the way, I represent a big family office. We're very worried about some of the new funds coming out that they actually don't think very deeply. And we're like, yeah, get it. And they said, could you actually have another call with us and stuff like that? So I would definitely say you should announce. I think the thing is, my general rule of thumb is you should never announce when you don't want inbound. I say the same thing to founders. When we invest in a company, we just say, don't announce. Announce
inbound
only
deal flow or inbound
anything. Like, I think that, if you're a startup, if you just closed your round, if you announce, you're super proud and think it's great. But now you're going to have 100 journalists and, salespeople and some people looking for jobs pinging you. And if you're not interested in recruiting, if you're now planning to actually sit 3 months and actually onboard this first big customer, you do not want that attention. So a lot of times we ask the founders, what do you want 50 to 100 emails now? And they say no. And we're saying don't launch them. And then essentially they just stay silent until they say, in 2 months, I think we would really like to have a lot of employee inbound. And it's like, okay, let's launch.
But it's hard to single out, right? Job seekers or further
investments,
but also customers.
No.
You get everything. That's right. You cannot single out.
But not only customers. I think that. So we have one company we invest in, which is an amazing company. I had a conversation with him yesterday where we're discussing a thing. He does not want more customers right now. Like, he's onboarding amazing customers. He wants to prove those and build case studies with them. He does not want 50 more customers right now. He doesn't want.
That's in the best case scenario.
No,
I would say in 80 to 90% of the case, they want a bit more, right, to get initial traction.
But it depends also
PR
on how
should be
complex
for
it is.
initial traction.
But it also depends on how complex it is to onboard, right? So, like, if you're, this is an enterprise company, you don't want 50 enterprise companies talking to you. You want, 4 that really go deep with pilots. And when they've done their pilots, then of course you want 10 more to pilot, and then you want hundreds. But in the beginning, if you have 100 people who want you to fly to all over the world, like, you're not going to do anything well. So I think it's exactly the same for us. When we announced, it was like, we announced because we felt we want startups to see us and founders to see us, but we also, of course, want LPs to say, oh, interesting, in a fund, let's go and talk to them. And timing-wise, we didn't do the perfect. We did it in June. I think we would have timed it better. We might have done it in September because the world, gets a bit slower during the summer. But I think it was still good. I think that some of these announcements, like if you do Sifted or if you're TechCrunch or something, the good thing is that these things, they're there forever, right? So like people find them and they say, oh, you started the fund then, what's going on? That we met people in October and said, oh, I saw you open the fund in June. What have you done since? And that was a great conversation, right? Like, we were able to describe what we've done since. And I think that the plan is, like, when we're raising fund 2 is, of course, we're going to go out and talk to our existing LPs. We're going to describe the new strategy and, like, see what they think. And then we have a list of LPs that we wish we would have for fund 2. And then we're essentially going to ping them and said, hey, we wish we were in the same boat. What can we do for this? Like, it's enterprise sales, right? If they say, I like it, but it's not for us, then it's like, okay, should we ping you back when we do fund 3? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And then we put them in the CRM.
Is there now room for a lot more funds, right? So it's been successful for you, partly because all the elements that you talked about, and you're really good at selling, right? Selling your fund, you have the right track record, you all come from a operator, and you've been part of funds, so it makes the deal pretty sweet for LPs. Would you acknowledge that there's still room for a lot more funds. We need a ton more
100%.
capital. And do you think we need a slightly unusual backgrounds to come as fund managers? So people that are more entrepreneurial, that are not investment backgrounds, and
100%.
LP should just pour money at them equally, sort of spray across completely different, diverse backgrounds. Any advice for them, by the way, to get started?
Towards the LPs or toward the GPs?
Toward the GPs.
I would say like the
funds.
I think that if you do a fund, I think the headache is like you have to figure out your unique angle. And I think that for me, there are essentially 3 or 4 unique angles. There's like one unique angle, which is like you have a geography and you're super local. Like you're saying, like we're going to be the killer fund in like climate fund in Berlin. We're going to like talk to everybody pre-seed and like we're going to get them before anybody knows anything about them. And then it's like you're the super local, super early stage. So you meet all the founders. You're like coffee meetings with founders, probably decaf coffee after a while. And it's going to be, or you're saying like we are super vertically focused. We only focus on behind the meter markets, and like that's the big thing. We're focusing on like, and then we can do all of Europe or whatever. But like we're very niche. We have a very strong thesis. We have a very strong belief. We might even have industry partners. We might have an LPs. Like we might have utilities at LPs. Like we have a vertical which we're super super strong within, like crazy strong. And we know we're going to 99% of companies. We're going to say, I'm sorry, you're not behind the meter. We're not going to do it. I'm sorry, this is not for us. That's another way of doing it. I think a third one is like you're just trying to become like the biggest, most famous fund. That I don't think is a good idea at all, because then you're competing against like Andreessen and Tiger and Index and Atomico. That you're up against the game that you don't want to do. So I think that for me, it always ends up in like either you're hyper local, hyper close, or you're hyper verticalized. And I think those are the two that I think are the best. I think there are always other things you can do. You can do like a quirky setup where you might have some kind of like you can build this community or something. The thing is, those are very, very hard. They need to be reflected in the fund. So, for example, I would be okay with somebody saying, we're doing a fund where we're doing 50 to 100k euros in every single climate tech startup in Europe that we think are good. And then we're inviting all these founders to their Slack group and we're super, super involved. The headache with doing that fund, if you go north of 100k, is you will end up having to do competitive deals. Like, I mean, you will do deals in competitive startups because otherwise there not going to be enough fish in the sea for you or enough, vegan fish in the sea. So the headache for you is like you'll have to figure out a way where the founders are saying, yeah, you're only in 100k tickets. This is a community thing. This is a float all boats. That's chill. But then, of course, that has to be reflected in the fund model. That has to be reflected in the structures. So I think that the ones where they don't working is if you're saying we're going to be the ultra close, white on rice, first stage ticket, and we're going to do $2 million tickets. And it's like, but that doesn't work. You can't do that. Or we're going to be the first ticket. We're going to cover all of Europe. That won't work because how are you going to find the deals in Edinburgh? So I think that one has to figure out something which is true all the way.
Wow. Well, Hampus, we've been talking for an hour already, and it's been super insightful. Definitely, I've only scratched the surface. I feel like I'm gonna welcome you for part 2. I would just like to jump into the rapid fire round. You know the principle. I'm gonna ask rapid questions with 2 options, option A or B, and I would love a short answer from you. Let's start with the first one. If you look at Pale Blue Dot today, what are you better at? Helping your portfolio or making great investments?
Definitely helping the portfolio.
Now, contrarian versus consensus decision. Looking back, which bet paid the biggest dividend so far?
I think that's way too early to say, but I would say my belief is definitely on contrarian.
Financial home run versus impact home run. In which company would you rather invest personally? Not asking your LPs and
no.
you.
Same. I would say like the hill we're willing to die on is the hill of solves a big problem but didn't work financially. Like we would be super sad if like this was a great company financially, but it was actually not actually very good for climate or the world. That would be a bad deal.
Now, 1 Tesla versus 100 startups. What is realistically more likely to drive the most CO2 reduction? So an enormous company, with the power law that we know in startups, or 100 startups?
So this is a slightly longer answer, but I would say I think 100 startups, if it's not in a market where we all super agree that's the problem. So I think that for me, I think Tesla's already proven by like look at the Volkswagens of the world and the Kias of the world. Now, if you look at climate reduction, I think that Volkswagen and Kia and the others are going to prove more valuable the coming 10 years than Tesla. But the thing is, without Tesla, Volkswagen wouldn't have done it for another 10 years. So I think that we need the startups to kickstart something and scale it and make it work. But then when you come to scale, I think you always need big companies, corporates and others. I think that the startups, I think that when you're going to remove mass amounts of CO2, you will need the acrylics, like you need the steel industries and the plastic industries of the world to do stuff. I can't see how a startup is going to produce steel or plastics or cement. But a startup will enable one of those companies to do it.
And the final question, one enormous fund versus 20 medium funds. What is more likely to drive CO2 reduction and positive impact in Europe?
Definitely smaller funds. I think the thing is that there are massive funds that really, really want to invest in climate, and in general they want to invest, but they don't want to invest in pre-seed and seed. So the thing is that there's a massive use case for both returns and impact to have a huge amount of seed and pre-seed funds that do deals and then bring them to the Creandums and Index and Atomicos and General Atlantics and Reese and Horowitz of the world, that then can look at this company and say, oh, that's a good company, let's go and let's plow in 30, 40, 50 million. I don't think it's a smart idea, because at the end of the day, if you're a niche fund, if you're a vertically focused fund, or you're close to the metal fund, the thing is, your job is to translate something from obscure to obvious.
Hampus, I love this conversation. I love how natural and all the insights that you have. It's got a bit of a brain dump for us, also for our listeners, we hope. To conclude this show, for people that would love to work for a great climate tech startup or even a climate tech VC fund, where would you advise them to look?
Oh my God, that seems like, it's a great question. I would say that I think the first thing they should do is they should think about what kind of they want to do themselves. I think that it's like, a lot of people say I want to work in climate, but they don't know what they want to do. So I think is the greatest thing. I just met a person last week who said he's going to spend 6 weeks on thinking what he wants to do and prototype different businesses and different ideas. And then he's going to go out and either found a company or join a company. And I think it's so much more valuable because he now has in 4 weeks, he will have a formed opinion. So I would say first, try to figure out what you love. And it could be anything from small companies to big companies to very financial markets to very kind of, block and tackle markets, whatever. And then after that, I think, of course, Pelbodot has a massive jobs page. You can go to that and check all our startups. I think that joining a fund is horrible. I was saying that you want to be a climate investor. I would say it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard going out there and saying, hey, I want to join a fund. So I think that's
horrible because it's competitive, or horrible in the day-to-day operation?
No. It's horrible because it's competitive. I would say that most people should not run funds. I think that it's like, the thing is, most people who, generally my rule of thumb is people who want to be investors probably shouldn't be investors. Because I think a lot of people who want to be investors, they're in it for the power game and the domination and deciding stuff. And that's probably not what the world needs. But the world needs people who can't stop themselves from doing it. So I think I would want more GPs who says, I want to start another company, but I really don't think that's going to help the world. I think I'm just going to start a fund. And then those are the ones I think are going to be way better. And of course, you also need people who are professional allocators who know how to think about capital allocation. But I think the problem is a lot of the funds historically have been started by capital allocators and not by people who actually care about the founders and the businesses. So I want more people who care about the founders and businesses to do it.
Love it. Let's end the show on this. Very interesting views. Thanks so much for being here for this wide-ranging conversation and personal insights. It's been fun. And to all of you, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks,
Ciao, Hampus. Talk soon.